Judge Moore scoffed at the shabbily dressed man before him, only to be flabbergasted when he reveals himself as a billionaire philanthropist on a bold mission to transform his old neighborhood. In the bustling courtroom of downtown San Francisco, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Ethan Walsh, a man few in the room took seriously given his appearance. He stood awkwardly at the defendant's table, his hair unkempt and beard scruffy, looking like he'd wandered off the street. On the bench sat Judge Franklin Moore, a man with a reputation for his sharp wit and no-nonsense approach in his courtroom. Franklin was used to dealing with high-profile cases and high-flying lawyers, not this curious spectacle of a man who seemed lost in the formality of the legal proceedings. He adjusted his glasses, a small smile playing on his lips as he prepared to address the room. "Ethan Walsh," the judge began, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "Charged with trespassing on private property and causing a disturbance. Quite the rap sheet for someone who looks like he can't even afford a proper lawyer." The crowd snickered. It was common for Judge Moore to throw a quip or two at defendants, but today the contrast between his polished demeanor and Ethan's disheveled appearance made the joke land harder. However, Ethan didn't seem fazed. He stood calm, his eyes scanning the courtroom with an unnerving serenity. "I see you've opted to represent yourself, Mr. Walsh," Judge Moore continued, skepticism clear in his tone. "Do enlighten us. Why should we take you seriously when it looks like you can't even take care of yourself?" More laughter filled the room, but Ethan's calm was steadfast. He looked directly at the judge, his voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, while my appearance might not be what you're accustomed to, I assure you, my reasons for being here are just as valid as anyone else's dressed in a more conventional attire. And I intend to prove not only my innocence, but also the necessity of my actions." The room fell silent, the levity quickly replaced by curiosity. Judge Moore raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Very well, Mr. Walsh," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Proceed." As Ethan began to speak, he did not start with a defense of his actions on the night in question. Instead, he told a story of growing up in a poor neighborhood only a few miles from the very courtroom they sat in, a tale of adversity, community struggle, and a boy who saw education as his only escape from poverty. What no one in the courtroom knew was that Ethan Walsh was no ordinary vagrant. He was, in fact, a billionaire philanthropist who had made his fortune in technology before turning his efforts to social causes. Disguised as a homeless man, he had returned to his childhood neighborhood to identify the needs of the people living there, understanding that to make real changes, he needed to experience their hardships firsthand. Judge Moore, initially amused by the day's proceedings, found himself leaning forward, captivated by Ethan's articulate and heartfelt exposition. The room was still, hanging on his every word, as he wove the reality of life on the streets into the fabric of legal defense, challenging every preconception the onlookers held about appearances and worth. As the clock ticked, marking the close of this segment, Ethan's final statement before the court adjourned for a break was a poignant setup for the revelations yet to come. "And so, Your Honor, while you see a man unkept and seemingly out of place, I stand before you as someone deeply connected to the pulse of this city's heart, and it is that connection that brought me here under these unfortunate circumstances." The courtroom buzzed with whispered speculations and newfound respect for the mysterious Mr. Walsh. Judge Moore, known for his tough exterior, showed a flicker of curiosity and, perhaps, respect. As the gavel struck, marking the end of the session, everyone knew this trial was more than it seemed, a narrative about to challenge the very foundations of their judgments and prejudices. As the courtroom reconvened, the air was thick with anticipation. The audience, previously amused by Ethan's shabby demeanor, now leaned forward, eager to uncover the truth behind this enigmatic man's tale. Judge Moore called the court to order, his gaze resting thoughtfully on Ethan, who stood ready to continue his narrative with calm assurance. Ethan began by detailing the events leading up to the charges against him. "On the night in question," he said, I was in the very neighborhood where I grew up, distributing essentials like food and warm clothing to those in need. My appearance, Your Honor, was intentional. To blend in, to understand, and to connect without the barriers my true identity might create. He paused, letting the room absorb his words. The property I allegedly trespassed upon is a vacant lot where many homeless gather at night. It's a place I knew as a child, a place forgotten by time and the city's budget. My disturbance. I was organizing a group of volunteers to set up temporary shelters when the police arrived. The courtroom was silent, processing the stark contrast between the man's appearance and his actions. Judge Moore, known for his stern courtroom management, showed a flicker of empathy. "You're saying your intention was humanitarian, not criminal?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan affirmed. "My actions were for the well-being of a community that is too often overlooked and underserved." Ethan then shifted the narrative, sharing vivid stories of individuals he had met that night, stories of hardship and resilience that resonated with everyone in the room. With each story, Ethan painted a picture of a community on the brink, a community he was determined to help. As he spoke, the room's atmosphere shifted from skepticism to a growing respect for Ethan's dedication to his roots. Even the prosecutor, initially poised for a quick conviction, began to doubt the simplicity of the case against Ethan. To strengthen his defense, Ethan introduced evidence of his philanthropic efforts, receipts for purchased supplies, testimonies from volunteers, and plans for future projects to support the neighborhood. Each piece built upon his argument that his presence in the area was not only innocuous, but essential. The tension in the room eased as understanding spread among the jurors and spectators. Ethan's strategic reveal of his identity as a philanthropist, masked by his disheveled exterior, challenged every preconceived notion about wealth, privilege, and responsibility. As the second part of the trial drew to a close, Ethan addressed the judge directly, his voice resonant with passion. "Your Honor, my wealth is an instrument, not just of personal comfort but of real change. Last night was not an act of defiance but of commitment, to lift others as I was once lifted." Judge Moore nodded slowly, visibly moved by Ethan's sincerity and the depth of his commitment. The court adjourned with a new air of reflection, the audience and the legal professionals alike contemplating the profound impact of genuine empathy and action over mere appearances. As people filed out of the courtroom, whispers of admiration and heated discussions about social responsibility filled the air. Ethan's story had begun to transform the public's curiosity into a deep, resonant understanding, setting the stage for a dramatic continuation of his legal and moral vindication. The courtroom was quieter than usual as the third part of the trial commenced. The initial skepticism had largely dissipated, replaced by a palpable respect for Ethan Walsh's mission. Judge Moore, reflecting the changed mood, welcomed the continuation of the defense with a nod towards Ethan, who stood ready to deepen the narrative of his transformative actions. Ethan shifted focus slightly, addressing the broader implications of his work. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began, "while my actions might initially appear as mere charity, they are, in fact, part of a strategic effort to address systemic issues that contribute to homelessness and poverty in communities like the one I grew up in." He proceeded to lay out his comprehensive plan, which included not only direct aid, but also initiatives for affordable housing, job training, and health services. "These are not just handouts," Ethan explained. "They are hand-ups, designed to provide sustainable opportunities for growth and self-reliance." The evidence presented was compelling. Ethan introduced collaborations with local businesses willing to provide job opportunities and partnerships with healthcare providers to offer essential services at no cost. His detailed plans for low-cost housing developments were supported by architectural drafts and letters of commitment from potential investors. As Ethan spoke, he walked the courtroom through a presentation of before and after photographs of similar projects he had funded in other cities, demonstrating their success in revitalizing neighborhoods and supporting their residents. "This is not just about one night of trespassing," Ethan stated. "This is about a lifelong commitment to change." The prosecutor, initially confident in the straightforwardness of the case, found it increasingly difficult to frame Ethan's actions as purely criminal. The narrative had shifted significantly, and the room felt it. Taking advantage of this shift, Ethan then introduced video testimonials from community members who had benefited from his programs. One poignant testimony came from a young woman who had been homeless and was now employed and living in stable housing thanks to the initiatives Ethan supported. Her gratitude and the visible change in her life struck a chord with everyone present. Each of these stories, Ethan concluded, represents a life that has been touched by efforts that began much like what I was doing the night I was arrested. These aren't just plans on paper. They are real results, real progress. Judge Moore, moved by the testimonials, took a moment before speaking. "Mr. Walsh," he said, his voice reflecting a rare softness, "your actions present a challenging paradox. On one hand, there's a clear breach of law, yet on the other, a profound moral justification grounded in tangible benefits to society." As the session drew to a close, the courtroom was abuzz with discussions about the nature of law, morality, and the true role of an individual in society. The prosecution seemed unsure of how to proceed, given the overwhelming positive impact of Ethan's actions showcased against the backdrop of a minor legal infringement. The day ended with the community and even the legal professionals in attendance reflecting on the complexities of justice and whether the law always served the best interests of the community. Ethan's case was becoming less about the charges against him and more about the implications of his broader goals and achievements. The court adjourned with Judge Moore's final words echoing in the courtroom. "We must consider not only the letter of the law, but also the spirit of justice." The anticipation for the next phase was high, as attendees considered the potential for a legal system that could embrace and support transformative change rather than punish its pioneers. As the fourth part of Ethan Walsh's trial began, the courtroom was filled with an intense sense of expectation. The legal arguments were set to shift from the broad impacts of Ethan's initiatives to the specific legal defenses for his actions. Judge Moore resumed the session with a thoughtful expression, indicating he was ready for the nuanced discussions that were about to unfold. Ethan took the stand once more, this time to address directly the legal accusations against him. "Your Honor, while I fully understand the charges of trespassing and causing a disturbance, it's crucial to contextualize my actions within the concept of necessity." Ethan's tone was earnest as he delved into the legal doctrine that justifies breach of law under the pressure of circumstances. "My actions were taken out of a necessity to provide urgent aid," Ethan explained. "The lot where I was arrested is not just any property. It's a lifeline for the homeless in cold months. My presence there was to ensure that the most vulnerable could survive the night." To bolster his argument, Ethan presented documented statements from emergency services in the city, highlighting how shelters were at full capacity that night and how temperatures had plummeted to life-threatening levels. He laid out emails and correspondence with city officials that he had initiated months before, seeking permission to use the lot for emergency shelter, which had not been granted due to bureaucratic delays. "The law recognizes the defense of necessity when the harm prevented outweighs the harm caused by the breach of the law," Ethan's lawyer elaborated, supporting Ethan's testimony with precedents from similar cases where the necessity defense had been successfully argued. The prosecutor challenged this defense, questioning the immediacy of the necessity and Ethan's inability to seek alternatives. "Mr. Walsh, couldn't you have directed these individuals to other resources or worked more aggressively with city officials to find a legal solution?" Ethan responded with composure. "We did explore all available options. But when faced with the immediate risk of harm to human life, waiting longer would not only have been impractical, but morally indefensible. My actions were a last resort, taken when all other avenues had been exhausted." The courtroom listened intently as Ethan's lawyer then called a legal expert in humanitarian laws to testify about the application of necessity in situations where public policy conflicts with individual actions taken for the greater good. The expert's testimony provided a strong endorsement of Ethan's decisions, highlighting the alignment of his actions with both ethical imperatives and legal standards under extraordinary circumstances. As the defense continued, the emotional weight of the testimonies and the robust legal arguments seemed to sway not just the opinion of the court, but also that of the public present. It was clear that Ethan's case was drawing attention to larger issues about the role of individual initiative in addressing social crises and the flexibility of legal frameworks to support such efforts. Judge Moore, known for his adherence to the letter of the law, appeared genuinely conflicted as he absorbed the arguments. "This case," he mused aloud, "challenges us to think about the law not just as a tool for maintaining order, but as a mechanism for justice, sometimes requiring us to weigh the direct benefits of acts that technically breach the statutes." As the court adjourned for the day, the buzz among the spectators was not just about the outcome of the trial, but about the implications for community-driven efforts in the face of systemic failures. The session had laid the groundwork for a potentially landmark decision, setting the stage for an emotionally charged and philosophically profound conclusion to Ethan's story. The final part of Ethan Walsh's trial commenced under a heavy, expectant silence. The courtroom was packed, with every seat filled by those who had followed the case's progression. Each person pondered the potential implications of the verdict. Judge Moore entered the room with a solemn demeanor, aware of the eyes upon him and the weight of the decision he was about to deliver. Ethan stood beside his lawyer, his expression calm yet resolute. The air was thick with anticipation as Judge Moore took his seat and called the court to order. "We are here to conclude the matter of Ethan Walsh," he began, his voice steady and clear. "This case has presented us with significant questions about the nature of justice, the flexibility of our legal system, and the moral responsibilities of individuals in the face of societal needs." Judge Moore paused, allowing his words to resonate in the silent courtroom. He then turned his attention directly to Ethan. "Mr. Walsh, your actions have undoubtedly raised a crucial debate about the balance between legal boundaries and humanitarian efforts. The necessity defense you've presented hinges on the urgent need to act in the face of human suffering, a principle that is as morally compelling as it is legally complex." The judge continued, outlining the key points of the case: the evidence of Ethan's extensive efforts to work within the system, the immediate threat to life due to extreme weather, and his clear intent to provide aid without personal gain. "The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances presented and the tangible benefits your actions provided to the community," Judge Moore stated, his tone reflecting the gravity of his forthcoming decision. Turning to the legal precedents and the arguments put forth by both the defense and the prosecution, Judge Moore took a deep breath before delivering his verdict. "Given the evidence and the exceptional circumstances of this case, the court finds that the actions of Mr. Walsh, while in breach of specific statutes, were justified under the necessity defense. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of the defendant, Mr. Ethan Walsh." The courtroom erupted in a mixture of applause and murmurs of disbelief. Ethan's face showed relief and a quiet gratitude as he nodded respectfully to the judge. Judge Moore called for silence once more. "This verdict is not just an exoneration of Mr. Walsh, but a call to our community and our legal system to reflect deeply on our priorities and our capacities for compassion and justice." He addressed the public and the media, emphasizing the need for systemic changes to address the root causes of homelessness and to enhance the support for community-driven initiatives. "Let this case serve as a catalyst for dialogue and action towards more comprehensive and humane responses to social crises," Judge Moore concluded, his voice imbued with a hopeful urgency. As the court adjourned, the crowd slowly dispersed, but the conversation was far from over. Outside the courthouse, reporters and community leaders gathered around Ethan, eager to hear his thoughts and plans following the trial. Ethan, standing on the courthouse steps, addressed the gathered crowd. "Today's decision reaffirms our shared duty to uplift and protect the most vulnerable among us," he said, his voice strong despite the whirl of emotions. "This is not the end of our efforts, but a beginning of a more engaged, more empathetic community action across our city and, hopefully, across our nation." He spoke of his plans to expand his initiatives, working closely with local authorities and organizations to create more robust safety nets and development programs. "Every individual in need has a story worth hearing, and every community holds the keys to solutions for its challenges. Together, we can build a society where compassion drives action, and justice includes understanding and support." The emotional and powerful end to Ethan's trial left a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. The story was more than just a legal victory. It was a poignant reminder of the power of individual action fueled by empathy and commitment. It challenged each person to consider their role in making a difference and to act with courage and conviction in the face of adversity. As the sun set over the city, the light lingered, symbolizing the hope and renewal that the day's verdict promised.